You think the 1% are chosen. No, my friends, they choose themselves the moment they abandon appearances and live in the end, regardless of the echo called reality. There is a moment in life when silence becomes heavier than noise, when even the strongest efforts no longer make sense, and something inside you whispers almost imperceptibly that the path you've been walking is not the path that leads you home. Maybe you've felt this quiet ache, the sensation of doing everything you know, trying every technique, repeating every affirmation, yet watching your reality remain exactly where it has always been. There is a fatigue that doesn't come from lack of action, but from carrying an identity that no longer fits the life you want to live. And perhaps that is where you find yourself right now, standing between the desire for transformation and the fear that nothing will ever truly change for you. But pause. Breathe. Notice what moves inside your chest when you hear this, because there is something far more ancient within you, something that has been calling you, not with urgency, but with certainty. It is the part of you that remembers what your mind has forgotten, that creation is not outside, that the universe is not a distant force judging your worthiness, and that the life you seek is not waiting somewhere in the future. It is here beneath the tension, beneath the doubt, beneath the exhaustion of trying to be someone who earns what is already theirs by nature. For a moment, let yourself recognize the quiet truth living beneath the noise of your daily fears. You are not failing. You are awakening. The frustration you feel is not a sign that you are blocked. It is the sign that you are standing at the threshold, the same threshold Neville described, where one person steps forward into the 1% path while the 33 remain lost, circling the outer court of consciousness, never entering the inner sanctuary. And if these words resonate, it is because you know, in a place beyond logic, that this video is not entertainment. It is initiation. It is a turning point disguised as a simple moment on an ordinary day. Feel this in your body. Feel the subtle shift of your breath as something inside you begins to unclench. You are not here by coincidence. You are hearing this now because a deeper part of you is finally ready to stop negotiating with limitation, ready to stop living as the version of you who hopes, ready to step into the one who decides, the one who assumes, the one who creates, the one who knows. Most people spend their entire lives looking at the world and believing it has the final word. They wait for signs, for proof, for external confirmation before they allow themselves to feel deserving, wealthy, loved, powerful. But creation does not come from waiting. Creation comes from awakening to the fact that everything you experience begins in the unseen chamber of your own imagination. The 1% path is not about perfection or control. It is about surrendering to the truth that feels uncomfortable at first. No one is coming to change your life for you, and no one needs to, because the one who holds the power to alter your world is already here, breathing with you, thinking with you, imagining through you. Take another slow breath. Don't rush it. Let the air settle in your ribs, as if your body itself were remembering its original posture, the posture of someone who lives from the inside out. Notice how your awareness sharpens when you give yourself permission to be present. Notice how your heart softens when you allow the possibility that nothing is wrong with you, nothing is missing, nothing needs to be fixed. You are simply stepping into a deeper understanding of how reality responds to consciousness. You are learning to see what the 33 cannot, that every moment is an invitation to return to the source within you. As you listen, let these words move gently through the thoughts you usually ignore, the ones hiding beneath the surface, the part of you that fears being disappointed again, the part of you that wonders if manifestation works for everyone but you, the part that whispers, late at night, why does nothing change? These questions do not make you lost, they make you honest, and honesty is the doorway to transformation. The 1% are not people without doubt. They are people who refuse to let doubt define their identity. They feel the fear, the uncertainty, the hesitation, and they do not bow to it. They simply return, again and again, to the truth that the world is an echo of the inner state. Let yourself feel the weight of this moment, the feeling that something in your life is shifting quietly, almost invisibly. You don't need to understand it. You don't need to force it. You don't need to predict what comes next. You only need to listen from the deeper place inside you, the place that recognizes truth not by logic, but by resonance. If your breath becomes slower, If your chest feels warmer, if your mind begins to soften, it's because you're entering a new frequency. You're stepping into the space where the 1% live, the space where imagination is not fantasy, but power, where feelings are not reactions, but commands, where identity is not inherited, but chosen. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not excluded. You are standing at the doorway of your own awakening, eyes opening to the fact that the life you desire is already aligned with the version of you who knows how to create it. And this video, this exact moment, is the beginning of your initiation into the consciousness of the one who manifests, while the others remain trapped in their old assumptions. Take one more breath. Feel how your entire body responds when you hear this. You are about to enter the path of the 1%, and once you enter, nothing inside you will ever settle for the old way of living again. Most of them don't realize they live in two worlds at once, the world of appearances and the world of assumption. They want new outcomes but remain emotionally tied to the old state that created the life they are trying to escape. They pray for transformation while continuing to think, feel and react as the version of themselves who has not transformed. They long for abundance with a heart trained by years of scarcity. They call for love from a place that still fears being unworthy of receiving it. And so they remain stuck, not because the universe is withholding anything, but because their inner allegiance still belongs to the reality they say they want to leave behind. There is also a quiet fear that follows them, though rarely acknowledged, the fear of believing fully in themselves. Because once you accept that imagination creates reality, there is no one left to blame, no timing to wait for, no external force to negotiate with, no reason left to stay small. And for many, this level of inner responsibility feels too vast, too naked, too immense. So they cling to secondary powers, astrology, luck, signs, other people's behaviors, market trends, timing, effort, anything that allows them to avoid the truth that their inner state is the only operative cause. The 33 remain lost because they scatter their power across the world, hoping the world will give it back to them in the form of proof. They also struggle because they live as observers rather than participants in their own creation. They think of their desire as something distant, something they must chase or earn or wait for. They imagine the life they want the same way one observes a painting in a museum, admiring it, longing for it, but separated by an invisible barrier of belief. They never step into it. They never think from it, so the painting never becomes a doorway. It remains a distant image, a possibility hovering at the edges of their lives, but never entering the center. Another reason the 33 remain wandering is that they allow their senses to dictate their identity. When the bank balance reflects lack, they feel lack. When the relationship collapses, they feel unworthy. When the opportunity doesn't arrive, they assume life is against them. Their senses narrate their destiny and they obey every word. They don't yet understand that the senses are the servants, not the masters. The senses reflect the past. They do not reveal the future. And yet the 33 bow before them as though they speak absolute truth. Inside their minds, the conversations run uncontrolled, unseen arguments, silent doubts, internal criticisms, imagined failures, all echoing through the subconscious like instructions the world must obey. They do not notice how every complaint shapes tomorrow. They do not see how every fearful scenario sketches an outcome. They speak to themselves as if powerless, and the world takes their inner speech as a command. And when something unpleasant happens, they accept it as final. They do not revise, they do not question whether the past deserves the authority they give it. They replay the moment as if replaying pain could ever produce healing. Their memory becomes a prison, and they decorate the walls with stories of why change is difficult. They forget that the past is clay, not stone. Above all, the 33 do not persist. They assume a new identity for a moment, but return to the old one as soon as the senses resist. Their faith lasts minutes, their doubt lasts days. They do not remain loyal to the new state long enough to let reality reorganize itself around it. They forget that persistence is not forcing, persistence is inhabiting, and yet beneath all this, something sacred remains untouched. A quiet knowing that they are meant for more, that life is not meant to be a struggle, that the power they glimpse in moments of clarity is not imagination but truth. This knowing is what leads them to teachings like Neville's. It is what brings them to this exact moment, listening with a part of themselves they rarely access, the part that recognizes truth before understanding it. Let this truth settle gently into you, even if part of you resists. The price of the pearl is the willingness to release every secondary power you once believed was shaping your path, every external authority you trusted more than your own inner state. For most people, this is too much to ask. They cling to something outside themselves, a prediction, a pattern, a ritual, a symbol, as if life were happening in a universe that responds to anything other than consciousness, and so they never truly step into the creative seat of their existence. They want freedom, but not the responsibility that freedom requires. They desire the pearl, but they are unwilling to sell what keeps them bound. There is a tenderness in understanding this. The human mind seeks comfort in the idea that something else is guiding the outcome, something larger, wiser, more certain. It is easier to believe that destiny is written in the stars than to accept that you are writing it with your assumptions. It is easier to trust a lucky sign than to trust your own feeling. It is easier to pray to a distant God than to recognize that the divine spark, the Christ consciousness Neville spoke of, lives within you as your imaginal power. To buy the pearl is not to reject spirituality, it is to embody it. It is to understand that the true altar is the mind, and the true offering is belief. Most will not make this exchange. They will keep one belief in the shadows, one exception, one external force they secretly imagine still has power over them. And that single hidden reservation is enough to divide the mind, enough to weaken the assumption, enough to prevent the law from operating with full potency. The mind that is split cannot create coherently. It oscillates, it hopes, it hesitates, it contradicts itself, and so reality mirrors that division, giving glimpses of manifestation, but never the full arrival. The 33 stay lost because they never fully step into themselves as the source. But the one who chooses the pearl enters a different frequency of living. They understand that imagination is not a place to escape into. It is the workshop of creation. They no longer look outward for confirmation because they have learned that the outer world is only a delayed echo of the inner one. Their faith is not blind, it is experiential. They feel the truth of their inner authority in their body, in their breath, in the subtle way their awareness softens when they stop searching for answers outside themselves. To walk the 1% path is to stand in the center of your own being and recognize that everything begins and ends in consciousness. It is to relinquish the need to make the world behave and instead tend to the garden of your inner state. It is to release the habit of seeking signs and instead become the one who generates them. It is to abandon the hope that someone else will carry you into the life you want and instead awaken to the certainty that you are already carrying the seed of that life within you. The pearl of great price is not expensive because it is rare. It is expensive because it asks for everything you use to avoid your own power. And yet once you pay that price, once you surrender all belief in external forces, you discover that nothing real was lost. You only released illusions. You only put down weights that were never yours to carry. Feel what rises in you as you hear this. A part of you already knows that you have been protecting beliefs that no longer serve you. A part of you is ready to step into a new relationship with your imagination. A part of you is ready to buy the pearl. And when that part of you is acknowledged, the path opens. The next gate comes into view, and the journey deepens into the mystery of creation itself. When a person thinks of their desire, they imagine it the way one imagines a place they hope to visit someday. There is distance, there is longing, there is timing, there is separation. The future feels like a horizon that keeps moving as you approach. You picture the outcome, but you remain anchored in the identity of someone who does not yet have it. And so the desire becomes a kind of mirage, visible, beautiful, inspiring, but unreachable for those who only observe it. Thinking of the end is like watching your dream through a window, close enough to see but not close enough to touch. And because consciousness is the only creative force, the world reflects that separation back to you. But to think from the end is entirely different. It is to enter the world of your fulfilled desire as though it were the only reality that exists. It is to feel yourself already being the one you once hoped to become, to speak, breathe, decide, and perceive as the version of you for whom the wish is not a possibility but a fact. When you think from the end, you do not imagine the future, you occupy it. You let it claim you. You let its feeling overwrite the old patterns that once defined your identity. You walk through your day with the quiet certainty of someone who has already crossed the threshold, someone whose inner state has aligned with the life they are calling forth. Thinking from the end does not require effort. It requires allowing the feeling of fulfillment to wash over the old assumptions, allowing yourself to stop waiting, allowing the desired state to become your emotional home, even if nothing on the outside has changed. Especially then, because the outer world is always slow to rearrange itself, always delayed compared to the immediacy of consciousness. The 33 remain lost because they wait for the physical world to move before they allow themselves to shift internally. They do not yet understand that the internal shift is the cause and the physical world is the echo. Thinking from the end is a quiet rebirth. It is the moment when you stop being the one who hopes and become the one who knows. And this knowing is not loud or dramatic. It feels like a subtle click inside the chest, a recognition that the desire is no longer something you chase, it is something you express. Your world begins to change the moment you identify with the fulfilled version of yourself. Your posture changes, your inner speech changes, your decisions change, your emotional responses adjust themselves to a new baseline, not because you are pretending, but because your consciousness has accepted a new origin point. Feel the difference between these two states as you hear these words. One keeps you waiting, the other moves you into alignment. One is built upon longing, the other upon acceptance. One reinforces separation, the other dissolves it. When you think of the end, the desire remains a concept. When you think from the end, the desire becomes an identity, and identity is destiny. As this realization settles within you, something begins to open. A new way of seeing emerges, one that no longer divides you from your desire. You sense that you are allowed to step into the state you once thought you needed to earn. You recognize that the world responds not to your wishes, but to your assumptions. And in that recognition, you awaken the same power that separates the 1% from the 33. Feeling is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It is the language of the subconscious, the medium through which the inner self accepts a new truth. You do not manifest what you desire, you manifest what you embody. You become the vibrational signature of your assumption, and the world organizes itself around that frequency. That is why the 33 remain wandering. Their emotional state continues to echo their past, even while their mind reaches toward a different future. They hold images of success while feeling unworthy. They imagine abundance while feeling financially insecure. They affirm love while carrying the emotional memory of abandonment. And the subconscious listens only to the feeling. It cannot be deceived by words that contradict the emotional tone beneath them. To feel the wish fulfilled is not to act as if or pretend. It is to let the body soften into the reality of what you desire. It is to allow your nervous system to experience the outcome before the senses confirm it. This is what transforms imagination into embodiment. When the feeling settles in your chest, when it flows through your breath and alters your posture, when your inner dialogue begins to match the emotion of fulfillment rather than the hunger for it, something irreversible happens. The subconscious accepts the state, and once accepted, it must express itself. Feeling is the assent. It is the inner yes that reshapes the unseen layers of your identity. You can repeat an affirmation 1,000 times, but if the feeling contradicts the words, the subconscious will obey the feeling. And this is why so many struggle. They live in emotional reactivity. They allow the world to dictate their state, rather than allowing their state to dictate the world. They react to bank balances, to silence, to delays, to the absence of proof. Their emotions rise and fall with circumstances, and so circumstances rise and fall with them. To master feeling is to reclaim emotional authorship. It is to no longer be shaped by the world you see, but to shape the world through the state you sustain within. When Neville said that feeling is the secret, he was revealing the blueprint of creation. Not by telling you to feel intensely, but by showing you that feeling consistently is what solidifies the new reality. When the feeling of the wish fulfilled becomes natural, effortless, familiar, then manifestation is not a matter of time, but of inevitability. Notice how your breathing shifts as you contemplate this truth. Something in you softens, not because you are forcing it, but because the deeper self recognizes its own language. Feeling is not something you generate artificially. It is something you allow. It arises when you grant yourself permission to step into the outcome without resistance, without analysis, without waiting for the senses to confirm it. Let this truth move through you slowly. The world you see is a mirror of the world you feel. Your reality has no choice but to conform to the emotional state you hold most often. This is why thinking from the end becomes powerful only when the feeling of the end is accepted. Once the feeling settles, the law takes over. The unseen begins to rearrange itself. People shift, opportunities reorganize, circumstances move into place, not because you forced anything, but because you became the version of yourself for whom the desire is already real. The 1% understand this instinctively. They do not chase emotion, they cultivate it. They do not react to life, they generate their inner atmosphere and let life respond. They do not wait for signs, they become the vibrational origin of everything they desire. The moment you understand that feeling is creation, not reaction, you step into a different dimension of power, and the path continues to unfold. The senses speak loudly. They speak with the authority of habit, the weight of memory, the momentum of past assumptions. They remind you of who you used to be, what you used to have, the patterns you once believed were unchangeable. They are like old storytellers repeating the same narrative, hoping you will continue to identify with the character you no longer wish to play. And yet, the moment you accept their version of reality as final, the moment you let what you see determine what you feel, you abandon your creative position and return to being an effect rather than a cause. The 33 remain lost because they trust what the senses show them more than what imagination reveals to them. To ignore the evidence of the senses is not to deny the world, nor to pretend circumstances do not exist. It is to refuse to grant them authority over your inner state. It is to understand that what you see now is merely the echo of past assumptions, not the prophecy of future outcomes. The senses report what has been accepted, not what is possible. They reflect the residue of old beliefs, not the reality of your new identity. When Neville said that the senses act like husbands impregnating you with limitations, he was pointing to the emotional influence they carry, the way they attempt to seed your consciousness with the feeling that nothing will change. Ignoring the evidence of the senses is an act of spiritual maturity. It is the moment when you turn inward and say, quietly but firmly, that the unseen is more real than the visible. It is choosing your inner state even when the world contradicts it. Especially then, because the contradiction is not a sign of failure, it is a sign that the old reality is losing its grip, that the new state is beginning to take root, that the world is shifting beneath the surface, even if the surface has not yet cracked open to reveal it. There is a deep power in indifference, not emotional suppression, not avoidance, but a calm neutrality that refuses to be destabilized by temporary appearances. This indifference is not coldness, it is mastery. It is the recognition that the senses are slow, linear, delayed, while consciousness is immediate. When you persist in your inner assumption despite what the senses display, you weaken the old pattern until it dissolves entirely. You stop feeding the past with your attention, and in doing so you free the future from its influence. Feel the subtle shift in your body as you absorb this truth. A softening in the chest, a loosening in the breath, a quiet assurance that nothing external has the authority to define you anymore. The moment you stop reacting to the old world begins to lose its power over you. Creation does not require you to fight circumstances. It requires you to stop bowing to them. Your inner state is the only true law. The senses will eventually follow, but they must follow. They cannot lead. This is where the 1% walk with unwavering steadiness. They do not flinch when reality shows them the opposite of what they have assumed. They do not look for signs to confirm their faith. They let their faith be the sign. They understand that the world rearranges itself only after the inner shift is complete, and so they remain faithful to the unseen until the seen has no choice but to transform. Your inner speech is the quiet architect of your reality, shaping outcomes long before anything appears in the physical world. Most remain lost because their inner dialogue repeats old fears, rehearses limitation, and echoes past identities. They argue silently, anticipate disappointment, and unknowingly seed the future with doubt. But the one who manifests recognizes that inner speech is creative power. When your self-talk begins to match the state of your fulfilled desire, your consciousness shifts. You stop narrating lack and begin speaking from the identity of someone already complete. This alignment becomes a quiet inner atmosphere that the outer world eventually mirrors. Revision is the moment you stop allowing the past to dictate who you are becoming. While most accept the day's disappointments as final, the one who manifests quietly rewrites them in imagination. They take the event, the conversation, the outcome, and reshape it into what should have happened, not as fantasy, but as a new emotional truth. Because the subconscious does not distinguish between memory and imaginal experience, revision dissolves old patterns at their root. By altering the past in consciousness, you free the present from its influence. This is why the 1% rise. They refuse to carry yesterday into tomorrow. There is a moment in every transformation when the new state feels fragile, almost delicate, as if it could disappear the moment the world contradicts it. This is where most people turn back. They assume the desire for a day, an hour, a breath, and then surrender it the moment their senses fail to support it. But manifestation belongs to the one who remains faithful. Persistence is not strain, it is quiet loyalty to the inner reality you have chosen. When you continue returning to the feeling of fulfillment, even gently, the assumption settles into your nature, and once it becomes natural, the world has no choice but to reflect it. The world reflects who you are being, not what you wish others would become. Most remain lost because they try to adjust circumstances, persuade people, or resist conditions, never realizing that every outer shift is born from an inner one. The person who manifests understands that there is no one to change but self. When you refine your inner state, your environment reorganizes naturally. Relationships soften, opportunities appear, and old obstacles dissolve without force. This is not passivity. It is alignment. As your concept of self elevates, the world mirrors that elevation with precision. You change, and everything changes with you. Every emotional state you enter carries within it the seed of a corresponding physical expression. Neville called this the law of reversibility. If an external event can generate a feeling within you, then that same feeling, awakened intentionally, can generate its physical counterpart. Most people wait for circumstances to justify their joy, their confidence, their sense of abundance. They hope the outer world will shift first so they can finally feel the way they long to feel. But the one who manifests understands that the inner state is the cause, not the result. By embodying the emotion of the fulfilled desire, even softly, you initiate the very movements that bring it into form. Feeling becomes the architect, and reality follows its design. There is a quiet threshold in the creative process where effort must dissolve into trust. Neville called this entering the Sabbath, the inner resting place reached only after the imaginal act feels complete. Most never arrive here because they continue checking for signs, questioning timing, or revisiting the desire with subtle doubt. They're very searching signals that the seed has not yet been planted. But the one who manifests understands that the Sabbath is the final seal. It is the calm that follows conviction. In this state, you no longer labor to make the desire real. You know it is already done. The inner work has been accepted, and the outer world now moves toward you with its own perfect rhythm. As the teachings settle, a quiet coherence forms within you. The fulfilled self no longer feels imagined but present, steady, familiar. Your inner speech aligns, your emotional rhythm softens, and the past loosens its hold. In this subtle clarity, you recognize that you have already stepped into the consciousness of the 1%. Every inner change reaches a moment when it becomes unmistakably yours, not imagined, not rehearsed, but lived. As your assumptions solidify, a new identity begins to take shape, quiet, grounded, and undeniable. You no longer strive to become, you recognize that you are already aligned with the self who fulfills every assumption. The shift is subtle, yet it changes everything.